Welcome to our video about the fascinating world of Pokemon and their placement on the Tree of Life. Today, we will take a closer look at Nidoking and Nidoqueen and their relationships with Sandslash. Loriciotheria is a group of higher mammals with great species diversity, established based on molecular genetic studies. It was scientifically introduced in 1999 by Peter J. Waddell and his colleagues. The name suggests that they originated from the former northern supercontinent, Laurasia. The sister group of Loriciotheria is likely the Euarchontogliers, which also includes humans, and together they form the taxon Barioeutheria. The stem species of both groups probably lived 85 to 95 million years ago in the northern hemisphere. The separation of the superorders is fossil documented by approximately 85 to 90 million-year-old finds of Xylem delestidae, which are related to rodents, Rodentia, and Zelestidae, which can be classified among the even-toed ungulates, Artiodactyla. When comparing with other superorders, there are numerous cases of convergent evolution, such as adaptation to marine life in Afrotherian manatees and Laurasiatherian whales and seals, or specialization in insects in Afrotherian aardvarks, Laurasiatherian pangolins, and xenarthrans like anteaters. Loriciotheria is the only mammal group to have actively conquered the air with bats, Chiroptera. With the blue whale, Balænoptera musculus, they not only have the largest mammal, but also the largest known animal ever to have lived. The odd-toed ungulates, Perissodactyla, formerly Mesaxonia, are an order of mammals, Mammalia. Unlike the even-toed ungulates, they are characterized by a usually odd number of toes. The order includes three recent families: horses, equidae, rhinoceroses, Rhinocerotidae, and tapirs, Tapiridae, with a total of around 18 species. The zoologist Richard Owen was the first to recognize that these three very differently looking families are related, and he also coined the term odd-toed ungulates. As an adaptation to different habitats and lifestyles, odd-toed ungulates have developed significant differences in body structure. Common features exist in the structure of the limbs and teeth. All living and most extinct species are quite large animals. With the rhinoceroses, the second largest land-dwelling mammals after elephants, belong to this group. The extinct Paraceratherium, a hornless, rhinoceros-related animal from the Oligocene, is even considered the largest land mammal of all time. Some primitive representatives of the order, like the early horse Hyracotherium, were quite small, with a shoulder height of only 19 centimeters. Apart from dwarf breeds of domestic horses and donkeys, today's odd-toed ungulates reach a head body length of 180 to 420 centimeters and a weight of 150 to 3,500 kilograms. While rhinoceroses are sparsely haired and have a thick epidermis, tapirs and horses have a dense, short coat. Most species are gray or brown in color. However, zebras have a typical striped coat, and young tapirs have white longitudinal stripes. The main axis of both the front and back feet runs through the middle digit, with the third toe being the largest in all species. The other digits are reduced to varying degrees, the least in tapirs. These animals still have 4 toes on the front feet, an adaptation to the soft ground of their habitat, and 3 on the back feet. Modern rhinoceroses have 3 toes on both the front and back feet. In horses, the reduction of the side digits is most advanced. These animals have only 1 toe, monodactyl. The feet are equipped with hooves, which almost completely cover the toe in horses. In rhinoceroses and tapirs, only the front edge is covered with a hoof, and the underside is soft. Rhinoceroses also have a soft sole cushion. Within the legs, the ulna and fibula are reduced. In horses, these bones are even fused with the radius and tibia, respectively, in the lower half. Anodopomorphy, a characteristic distinguishing this group from others, is the saddle-shaped talonavicular joint, the ankle joint between the talus and the navicular bone, which greatly restricts movement. The thigh is relatively short, and the clavicle is absent. Odd-toed ungulates have an elongated head, primarily due to a long maxilla, upper jaw. The different snout shapes of the individual families are due to differences in the structure of the premaxilla. The lacrimal bone has a projection into the eye socket, and audipomorphy is the broad contact between the lacrimal bone and the nasal bone. Another characteristic is a particularly massive jaw in grass-eating species. The jaw joint is high, and the mandibular ramus is enlarged. Rhinoceroses have one or two horns, which, unlike the horns of even-toed ungulates, do not consist of bone but of agglutinated keratin. The number and structure of teeth vary depending on diet. Incisors and canines can be very small or completely absent. For example, in the two African rhinoceros species, in horses, only males usually have canines, tushes. Due to the elongated upper jaw, there is a gap, diastema, between the front teeth and the molars. The premolars are usually molariform. The surface shape and height of the molars depend heavily on whether the main diet consists of soft leaves or hard grass. Each side of the jaw has 3 or 4 premolars and always 3 molars. In the structure of the digestive tract, odd-toed ungulates show significant differences from the mostly herbivorous even-toed ungulates. Odd-toed ungulates are hindgut fermenters, similar to rodents, meaning that digestion primarily takes place in the large intestine. The stomach is always simple and single-chambered. Unlike the complex, multi-chambered stomach of even-toed ungulates, fermentation occurs in the very large cecum, which can hold up to 90 liters in horses, and the double-looped colon. The intestine is very long, up to 26 meters in horses. The efficiency of food utilization is relatively low, which likely led to the absence of small odd-toed ungulates today, as larger animals have a lower food requirement per kilogram of body weight and a smaller surface-to-volume ratio, which is better for heat regulation. Today's distribution of odd-toed ungulates is only a small part of a once larger, nearly worldwide occurrence. Wild representatives of this group are found today in Central and South America, Eastern and Southern Africa, and Central, Southern, and Southeastern Asia. During the heyday of odd-toed ungulates from the Eocene to the Oligocene, their distribution, with great diversity, extended over much of the globe, excluding Australia and Antarctica. They reached the South American continent with horses and tapirs after the formation of the Isthmus of Panama in the Pliocene about 3 million years ago. They disappeared from North America about 10,000 years ago and from Europe with the extinction of the tarpan in the 19th century. Hunting and habitat restriction have led to the fact that even today, the wild species often exist only in fragmented relic populations. In contrast, domestic horses and donkeys have achieved worldwide distribution as domesticated animals, and feral animals of both species are now found in regions where no odd-toed ungulates originally lived, such as Australia. Depending on their habitat, different species of odd-toed ungulates lead different lifestyles. They are generally crepuscular or nocturnal animals. Tapirs live solitary and primarily inhabit tropical rainforests and other forests. Rhinoceroses also live mainly as loners and are found in dry savannas in Africa and moist swamp or forest areas in Asia. Horses, on the other hand, inhabit open areas such as grasslands, steppes, or semi-deserts and live in groups. Odd-toed ungulates are strictly herbivores, feeding to varying degrees on grasses, leaves, and other plant parts. Typically, a distinction is made between primarily grass-eating forms, white rhinoceros, equids, and leaf-eating forms, tapirs, other rhinoceroses. According to studies published in March 2015, odd-toed ungulates are closely related to at least some of the so-called Meridiungulata, South American ungulates, a highly diverse group of hoofed mammals that existed from the Paleocene to the Pleistocene in South America, whose systematic unity is largely unresolved. Partly due to their paleogeographic distribution, they have been linked with Afrotheria, which is supported by some anatomical features like the structure of the vertebrae or the talus bone. However, protein sequencing and comparison with fossil collagen obtained from some phylogenetically younger representatives of the Meridiungulata, specifically Macrauchenia from the Litopterna group and Toxodon from the Notungulata group, revealed a close relationship with odd-toed ungulates. Both related groups, the odd-toed ungulates and the Litopterna notungulata, are now summarized in the higher taxon Pamperosadactyla. This related group within Ungulata contrasts with the even-toed ungulates and whales, Cetartiodactyla. 2 years later, molecular genetic studies confirmed this result at least for the Litopterna line. The separation of this line from the one leading to odd-toed ungulates occurred around 66.15 million years ago, roughly corresponding to the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. The origin of both groups can presumably be traced to the Condylarthra, a heterogeneous group of primitive ungulates that mainly inhabited the northern hemisphere during the Paleogene. Studies from 2020 also suggest an anatomical sister group relationship between the Litopterna and the odd-toed ungulates. In 2021, anatomical considerations led to a study dividing South American ungulates into two large groups, Panameriungulata and Sudameriungulata. Panameriungulata includes the Litopterna and Didylodontidae and are said to be closely related to odd-toed ungulates according to the study's authors, Leonardo S. Avila and Dimala Muth. In contrast, Sudameriungulata includes the remaining South American ungulates, Notungulata, Astropatheria, Pyrotheria, and Zanungulata, and are considered part of the Afrotheria. This view contradicts the mentioned biochemical analyses, as noted by Avila and Muth, and was also rejected by a phylogenetic study from 2022. Fossil records show a high number of odd-toed ungulates with diverse forms, and the most important evolutionary lines include the following groups. The Brontotheroidea were among the earliest known large mammals, consisting of the families Brontotheridae, synonymous with Titanotheridae, whose best-known representative is Megacerops, and the more basal group Lambdotheridiidae. They were especially characterized in their later phase by a bony horn at the transition from the nose to the frontal bone and generally flat molars suitable for soft plant food. At the beginning of the Upper Eocene, the Brontotheroidea, almost exclusively limited to North America and Asia, became extinct. The Equidea, horse-like, also developed during the Eocene. The Paleotheridae, mainly known from Europe and whose best-known representative was Hyracotherium, became extinct in the Oligocene. The actual horses, Equidae, on the other hand, flourished and spread. The development of this group can be observed well through fossil finds, showing the reduction in the number of toes, the elongation of limbs, and the progressive adaptation of teeth to hard grass food. The Calicotheroidea represented another characteristic group consisting of the families Calicotheridae and Lophiodontidae. Within the Calicotheridae, claws developed instead of hooves, and the front legs were drastically elongated. The best-known genera include Calicotherium and Moropus. The Calicotheroidea did not become extinct until the Pleistocene. The Rhinoceratoidea, rhinoceros relatives, showed great diversity from the Eocene to the Oligocene, with dog-sized leaf-eaters, semi-aquatic animals, and even huge long-necked animals. Few had horns on their noses. The actual rhinoceroses, Rhinocerotidae, originated in the Middle Eocene, and 5 species survive to this day. In addition, several fossil families, largely present in the Eocene and Oligocene, are documented. Traditionally, the Amidodontidae, hippo-like, water-dwelling animals, and the rather long-legged Hyracoodontidae are distinguished. The latter developed extremely large, long-necked forms like Paraceratherium, formerly known as Baluchitherium or Indracotherium, the largest known land mammal. However, as the Hyracoodontidae turned out to be a wastebasket taxon, there have been various attempts to reorganize them recently. Partly, the Indracotheridae, also Paraceratheridae, and the Aegisodontidae are separated from the Hyracoodontidae, and the Forstercooperidae are split from the former. Thus, the actual Hyracoodontidae now stand more basally within the Rhinoceratoidea. The Tapiridoidea, taper-like, reached their greatest diversity in the Eocene, with several genera inhabiting Eurasia and North America. They retained a more primitive body structure, with only the development of a proboscis being remarkable. Extinct families include the Heloletidae, which appeared quite diverse in North America and Eurasia, with well-known genera such as Helolides, Heptodon, Collodon, or Desmodotherium. Besides this basal group, the Deparatellidae were mainly restricted to Eurasia. They include forms like Deparitella, Teleolophus, and Irenolophus. The Lophioletidae, an Asian group of primitive odd-toed ungulates, might also be classified in the Tapiridoidea. Alternatively, they might be considered a more basal group of the rhinoceros-tapir relationship. The evolutionary history of odd-toed ungulates is relatively well documented through fossils. Numerous findings reveal the radiation of this once much more diverse and widespread group. The origins of odd-toed ungulates are unclear. Some suggest a North American origin, which would align with the rapid development of the Phenacodontidae. On the other hand, Asia could also be considered the primary center of evolution. One of the oldest known relatives of odd-toed ungulates is Rudinskea from the late Paleocene of East Asia. The skull, measuring just over 8 centimeters, belongs to a very small and primitive animal that shows similarities to odd-toed ungulates, especially rhinoceroses, and their relatives, in the slightly pie-shaped enamel structure on the back molars. Other features, such as the development of the tooth cusps, might also suggest a closer relationship with Tethytheria, which includes elephants. Findings from Western India support the notion of an Asian origin and narrow down the center of origin to South Asia. From the Cambay Shale Formation, dating to the Lower Eocene around 54.5 million years ago, come remains of Cambaytherium, which belongs to the family Cambaytheridae. The teeth show similarities to early odd-toed ungulates and Tethytheria, comparable to Rudinskea. Extensive skeletal material of Cambaytherium is also available. Features such as the saddle-shaped indentation of the navicular joint at the lower end of the talus and the mesaxonic structure of the front and hind feet, the main axis of the foot ran through the middle digit, digit 3, indicate a close relationship with odd-toed ungulates. Since the feet, unlike early odd-toed ungulates, still had 5 toes, Cambaytheridae are now considered the sister group of odd-toed ungulates. It is possible that the ancestors of odd-toed ungulates reached the Indian subcontinent, which was then an island drifting northwards towards Asia, via a land bridge from the Afro-Arabian landmass. From the same formation, one of the most primitive known representatives of odd-toed ungulates, Bastunolaphus, has been described, although it is so far only represented by 2 teeth. Odd-toed ungulates appear relatively suddenly at the beginning of the Lower Eocene around 56 million years ago in both North America and Asia. The oldest North American finds include Cypherpus, a horse representative from the Willwood Formation in northwestern Wyoming. Around the same time, Eryhippus, also a horse relative, is recorded in Asia from the Lingcha Formation in northwestern China. Additionally, Orientalophus, a representative of the stem group of the rhinoceros tapir line, Protomorpus, an early form of the Ancylopida, and Dangiangia, an early member of the Brontotheridae, are found there. Shortly thereafter, more distant ancestors of tapirs and rhinoceroses, such as Ganderalophus or Meridialophus, as well as Litolophus, which is in the developmental line of the Calicotheridae, appear in Asia. In North America, Eotidinops from the Brontotheridae group is documented. Thus, in the course of the Lower Eocene, the main large groups are represented by primitive members. Initially, members of the different lines looked quite similar, with an arched back and generally 4 toes on the front and 3 on the hind feet. Hyracotherium, considered a representative of horse relatives, outwardly resembled Hyraceus, the first representative of the line leading to today's rhinoceroses and tapirs. All were relatively small compared to later forms and lived as fruit and leaf eaters in forests. The first giant forms appeared with the Brontotheridae in the Middle and Upper Eocene, with the well-known Megacerops from North America reaching up to 2.5 meters in shoulder height and possibly weighing about 3 tons. The decline of the Brontotheridae at the end of the Eocene is associated with the emergence of more competitive herbivores. Towards the end of the Eocene, further successful lines of odd-toed ungulates emerged, such as the Calicotheridae and the rhinoceroses and their closer relatives, whose development also began with very small forms. The Hyracodontidea, the closest fossil relatives of rhinoceroses, included Paraceratherium, the largest land mammal of all time. This animal weighed up to 20 tons and lived in the Oligocene in Eurasia. Other flourishing groups of that time were the Aminodontidae, with Aminodon, Cadurcodon, or Celaminodon, as well as the Aegisodontidea. With the beginning of the Miocene, about 20 million years ago, the odd-toed ungulates reached Africa for the first time, as the closing of the Tethys Sea connected it to Eurasia. However, the subsequent faunal exchange introduced new animal groups into the former habitats of the odd-toed ungulates, such as the proboscideans, whose competition led to the extinction of some odd-toed ungulate lines. The rise of ruminants, which occupied similar ecological niches and had a more efficient digestive system, is also associated with the decline in the diversity of odd-toed ungulates. Climate changes during the Miocene, leading to cooler and drier conditions and the spread of open landscapes, significantly contributed to the decline of odd-toed ungulates. Nevertheless, some lines, such as horses and rhinoceroses, thrived by adapting to harder grass diets through anatomical modifications. This led to the emergence of open-land forms that colonized the newly formed landscape types. With the formation of the Isthmus of Panama in the Pliocene and the subsequent Great American Faunal Interchange, odd-toed ungulates, specifically horses and tapirs, reached South America, one of the last accessible habitats, about 3 million years ago. However, odd-toed ungulates were also affected by the extinction of large mammals at the end of the Pleistocene, resulting in the disappearance of horses in North and South America and the woolly rhinoceros. Whether hunting by humans, overkill hypothesis, climate changes associated with the end of the Ice Age, or a combination of both factors were responsible for this extinction is disputed. That's it for now. In the next episode, we will take a close look at rhinoceroses, the family to